Hey guys, so I wanted to go ahead and create a video that basically shows you kind of the anatomy of the study schedule. This is subject to change a little bit, but in general, the core components are going to be approximately the same. So in general, the way that we start is we get a bunch of responses from you. You tell us, which exam you're taking, what some of your priorities are, which particular schedule you're going to be focusing on overall. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be able to put in that entire schedule within your 90-day schedule, because that completely depends on how much time you have available within those 90 days. But it is good for us to have an idea as to how many hours you're planning on studying. It tells us a little bit of your background in terms of whether or not you failed an exam before, and then also obviously the dates that you are going to be studying and how many hours you can study on those particular dates. Okay. Some of the other information that we like to sometimes ask is, do you plan on taking practice exams? How many would you like to take? Do you want them to be half mock exams or full mock exams? And then we try to take all of this information, and this is all subject to change in the future in terms of what exactly the questions are that we ask in order to streamline this process. But in general, those are the types of questions that we ask, and we try to go ahead and put a copy of all of your responses here within the file that you end up finally getting. Okay, so that's this tab right here. That's the third tab. This second tab is also fairly self-explanatory, but basically it's the course study guide and the pages from start to finish of every single chapter for that particular year. Okay, and then over here is your actual schedule. And based on everything that we look at, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, we may provide some feedback, or we may even provide a special personalized video specifically for you and your schedule that we spent a lot of time creating. And if we do any of that, the place that you're going to find that is right over here on that fourth tab. You might find some writing, you might find one video link, you might find two video links depending on how much I potentially had to say that day, or it's possible that this tab just simply won't be there and you only have these first three tabs. Okay? Now let's take a look at the schedule. So, over here, this basically tells you approximately how many pages there are to consider core study material. Now, as far as the Pediatrics Board Review core study material is concerned, what I'm referring to is the core study guide and then also the Q&A book. Okay, so the core study guide is obviously core material, but the Q&A book should not be treated like another question resource. For example, it should not be treated like prep questions or exam master questions or board vital questions or med study questions. Those are all great questions to practice from, but I don't want you to treat the PBR Q&A book like that. I want you to treat that information like core study material. Go through it slowly, make sure you know that information really, really well. As far as all the other questions that you look at from other resources, those questions should be considered practice material. So you go through the questions, you're practicing your pacing, you're practicing the art of letting go of a question that you are having a difficult time studying, you're practicing question answering strategies, and all in, maybe you're spending about 5 minutes per question. About 75 seconds to answer a question, and then the remainder of that 5 minutes is spent trying to understand the answers. And usually the way that I approach it is, if I answer the question correctly, I take a look at my answer choice, I take a look at the explanation, I'm happy with it, and I move on. If I answered it incorrectly, then first I go and see why my answer choice was incorrect. Then I look at the correct answer choice and understand that particular answer choice, and then I usually go ahead and move on. I try not to get too deep into all of the explanations that prep oftentimes has, or that other resources oftentimes have. And also those can sometimes lead us to other things like references and the black hole of Google, and that's just not what you need to be doing when it comes to preparing for this board exam. You really need to be focusing on the core study material, or you also need to be preparing yourself for the actual board exam by going through question after question after question, so that it's methodical, so that it's just absolutely robotic. When you get in there, it's old hat. It's just after months and months of just practicing questions over and over again, it just becomes routine. So That's why we do recommend that you try to do questions every single day, okay? So let's get back over here. So over here, we're taking a look at the page numbers that we have. So, there's 382 pages. Up here, I have a couple of different links for you. There's the 300-hour study schedule that I have online, the 500-hour study schedule that I have online, and then also the exam day blog post that I have over here, which is just awesome in terms of helping you break down, how you should be preparing. Okay, so let's get back into the study schedule. So over here, we have the total number of pages that you should consider core study materials. So that includes the core study guide as well as the Q&A book. Over here, we have a few different links to articles that are written on the website. There is the schedule for the 300-hour study schedule. There's also the article covering the 500-hour study schedule, and then there's also an article that covers the actual exam day, and it talks to you about the number of blocks that there are, the amount of time that you have per block, which also then allows you to understand about approximately how much time you have per question, about how many questions you should be getting through at certain milestones within each block. By milestones, I mean, by the half-hour mark and things like that. And then there's also just other great tips and tools in there for you to prepare for the actual exam day and just the mechanics of that day. Okay, so make sure you definitely read that article. All right, and then going down over here, based on your responses, then we include approximately how many hours you are planning on studying within the 90-day period that we are mapping out for you. So even though you might be planning on studying 500 hours altogether, it's possible that within the next 90 days, you were only able to submit approximately 200 hours to study. And it's possible that you actually have all 500 hours mapped out within 90 days because you waited a little bit later and now there's only 3 months left until the exam, and you're cramming and you're going to make sure that you get all 500 hours in. But whatever we are mapping out for you is located here. And this over here refers to the amount of time that you're going to be studying the core material. So that refers to this information over here. And then also the number of hours that you're going to be dedicating to the art of question answering. So the practice questions. So this is the number of hours for questions. Okay. And then over here, what you're going to see is different colors, and they're going to represent these different blocks that we were able to create for you based on how much time you have within the 90 days and us moving you through different rounds based on your speed on each page. Initially, we anticipate it's going to take someone, 18 minutes per page, potentially even 20 minutes per page to get through the core material. After that, it should get faster and then faster and then faster. And my general approach is, your first round through, I don't want you to leave any stone unturned. You should be knowing every single thing in that book. And if you have to go outside of PBR to understand a concept, then that's okay. But make sure that by the end of that first round, you never have to go outside of PBR. And it's really just about understanding everything that is within that book. So that means everything that I've written inside the book, and then all of the notes that you've taken, all of the mnemonics that you've created in there, and just everything. So that first time is really going to be a little bit painstaking, and it's going to take some time. So that first time is really going to be painstaking, and it could take quite a bit of time, anywhere from 18 to 20 minutes. Now, if you've already gone through the material multiple times before, perhaps you failed last year and you're now studying again, and you're looking into coaching and you're doing, whatever you need to, it's possible that you're actually getting through the book right now at about 12 minutes per page. And if you are getting a study schedule closer to the time of the exam, it's possible that you're taking it for the first time and you've already been through the book a couple of times, and right now you're averaging approximately 12 or 8 minutes, but you just still want to get through it multiple times within the amount of time that you have left. Regardless of what it is, based on all the information that you give us, we go ahead and map out your study schedule based on about how many minutes you are getting through each page now, and then also kind of what we anticipate for future rounds. And then we go ahead and color code them all over here. And we go ahead and list the name of the month over here, and then the date of the month over here. And then on this column, you're going to see the number of hours that you're going to be studying that day. So that's just, all together, how much time are you putting in that day? And that just means pure studying, okay? So that doesn't mean breaks to go to the restroom and things like that. Those should have already been built into the number of hours that you submitted to us. Over here, it talks about the amount of time that you are going to spend simply practicing questions, okay? And this is approximately how many questions you're going to get through. And the way that we get to this number over here is based on our calculation of approximately 5 minutes per question for practice, okay? where approximately 75 seconds is spent doing the question, and then the rest of the time is spent reviewing the answer. So you could do, for example, if this was your schedule, you could do all 9 questions within, whatever that is, 9 times 75 seconds. The remainder of the time of approximately your 45 minutes on questions would be spent just reviewing the answers. Over here, this is the amount of time that you're going to be spending on the core material. Okay, so that could be either the core study guide or the core study guide and then also transitioning into the Q&A book, or that could just be on the Q&A book if you've already moved through the core study guide and perhaps you're further along in your schedule and you're over here somewhere. Okay. And then over here, it's going to tell you approximately how many pages of the core material you are going to get through. And the really cool thing that we do over here on top of all of this is we write, what is the page that you're going to be starting on that day? What is the chapter, or what are the chapters that you are going to be touching that day and then moving through? And then what is the page that you are going to end on? Okay. So for example, you'll start on page 50 and you'll end on page 50 because you only have time to do one page on this particular day if you want to get your time in for practicing questions. So you're just going to be on page 50. The next day, you're going to be moving a lot more. So 51 through 58. And on this day, you've got 7 hours to study. You're going to make some real progress, and you're going to finish up the adolescent medicine chapter, do the entire endocrinology chapter, and then you'll also start in on the OBGYN chapter. Okay, so that's kind of what this is about. Now, we've also built in things like catch-up time, and we've also built in, mock exams, whether that's a half mock or a full mock, and so that's also something that you're going to see, and that'll all be written out over here. The one thing that I would say is, as far as catch-up time is concerned, we try to build it in based on what you've told us, but sometimes it's a little bit more personal to you in terms of how you want to structure your own catch-up time. And I would say that you really should try to prioritize practicing questions every single day that you are studying. But sometimes, you may think that it doesn't really make sense just to study one page. So like maybe you're going to do just questions on this day, and then the next day you're going to skip the questions and you're actually just going to do the core study guide. That's fine. Making a little bit of adjustment here and there completely makes sense. The other thing that I would say is, if you start to find that you are falling behind, do not beat yourself up. I want you to just take that opportunity to maybe skip questions for a day, right? And then you can use that time to catch up on your core material. At the end of the day, it's going to be the core material that you have to stay on top of in order to maintain this pace and this particular schedule. And in general, if you follow our schedule, you will do more than enough questions than you need to. In general, I recommend approximately 750 to 1,000 questions for initial exam takers, and about half that many for anyone who's taking the recertification exam. But if you follow our schedule, you will easily meet those numbers. And so if you have to sacrifice questions every once in a while in order to build in a little bit of catch-up time, go ahead and do that. Okay? And then as you're moving through these different rounds, you can read a little bit more about this in my study schedule articles. But as you're moving through the rounds, what I want you to do is, that first time, like I said, leave no stone unturned. The second time, go through it, and now the stuff that you just absolutely know cold, right? The stuff that you didn't even need to read the PBR for, ignore that. Start marking up the other areas that you still need to spend more time on. And that can be with a really light colored highlighter or a pen, but just keep in mind that you're going to go through this book over and over and over again, and each successive time you're probably going to have to use a different color something, a different color highlighter. For me, I always start off with yellow, and then after that potentially I would move on to orange, and then after that I would potentially move on to like a light green, and then eventually I would end up with like a blue, like a dark colored blue or something. And so initially maybe 75% of the page had highlighting on it, or I would make brackets around paragraphs that I just absolutely needed to review again. But then by the end of it, maybe it was about 25% or 40%, whatever it might be, that I needed to review on any given page. And being able to kind of condense that amount of studying that you need to do on any given page will allow you to slowly start getting through the book faster and faster and faster. And that's why, you may start off at 18 minutes per page for a round of studying all of the core material, but then it's going to move faster, a 12-minute round, and then an 8-minute round. And by the end, hopefully, it shouldn't be taking you more than about 6 minutes per core study guide page to get through the material, okay? I think that's about it. You know, those are some of my thoughts on the schedule, the different components of it, the anatomy of how this is broken down, you know, what all the different tabs mean and everything. You know, hopefully it all makes sense. If something doesn't make sense whatsoever and you think that, you know, we should try restructuring something, definitely feel free to let us know. We're always open to feedback. And, you know, I really do hope that you enjoy your schedule and that you are able to stick to it. Once again, you know, if you have to sacrifice something on any given day, go ahead and sacrifice some questions. Just make sure you're moving through that core study material, because you need to know the material inside and out in order to be able to do well on your exam. Okay, and once again, I really hope that you enjoy the schedule. You know, we put a lot of time and energy and thought into every single one, and we would love to get your feedback on the schedule, and we'd love to hear from you after the exam. Take care.